Satanism is a topic that's disturbing and upsetting to some people, but generally speaking, those who find the notion or discussion of Satanism disturbing tend to be people who don't know anything about the subject. They avoid it because of everything they've been told to believe about it, and as a result, most people aren't interested in finding out the truth for themselves. As the old saying goes, knowledge is power, and once you understand something more clearly, there's usually no more reason to fear it.
No, don't speak of the devil. He wants you to. He wants you to. No, don't speak of the devil, and you do too. And you do too.
Hello and welcome to the first remade episode of Making Sense of the World. That's right, this is a reboot because I wasn't happy with the previous version of this video that I made last year. So I decided to redo it. My name is Christina Engler, and I'll be your companion on this little journey down several rabbit holes as we go along. I've always found things like religion and theology and ideology fascinating, and I like to share what I've learned with interested others. In this video, I'll be giving you a brief description of different types of Satanism, and yes, there are many more than you think. Satanism as a new religious movement did not exist before 1966, when Anton Sandor LaVey founded the Church of Satan in San Francisco, leading to the creation of the paradigm of LaVeyan Satanism, which is atheistic by nature and definition. But there are in chief four main types or groups which exist today under the heading of Satanism. LaVeyan or Atheistic Satanism is, in occult terms, a left-hand path philosophy and revolves around hedonism and the glorification of the self, and is rarely preoccupied with thoughts of any afterlife. There are no gods in Atheistic Satanism, and the term and image of Satan is a metaphor for the practitioner themselves. Atheistic Satanists don't literally believe in or worship Satan as a godlike figure. They're atheists, but unlike other atheists, they use the mythology and imagery of Satan as a metaphor for self-empowerment and to frame their own understanding of the world and their place in it. I like to call it atheism, but with props. LaVeyan and Atheistic Satanism in general are arguably the most visible and well-known form of Satanism today. Maybe that's because they've been around for so long. But there are other kinds of Satanism as well, or religious groups or movements that identify as Satanism. Let's take a quick look at the other main types. First, we have Atheistic Satanism, as already discussed. Then we have Theistic Satanism, wherein the practitioner actually does believe in Satan in one form or another as a literal being and worships it. Some groups exchange the name and imagery of the Christian Satan for similar figures in other religions, for example, Set from the ancient Egyptian religions, ancient Egyptian pantheon. And from that we have the Temple of Set, which was established in the 1970s. Unlike how many critics like to mischaracterize Satanists of all types, all indications are that the vast majority of both theistic and atheistic Satanists are generally ordinary people who tend to be mostly law-abiding and don't live up to the trope peddled by hysterics. So now we have atheistic and theistic Satanism. Now we change gears a little and look at Luciferianism, which centers around the personification of Lucifer instead of the Judeo-Christian personification of Satan. Like Satanism, Luciferianism also takes both theistic and atheistic forms with similar connotation. In contrast to Satan, which is a characterization and metaphorical personification of evil in the Abrahamic context, Lucifer is based in ancient culture. That doesn't mean that there was an actual ancient god called Lucifer. A Lucifer is essentially a bringer of light. And in that context, it has also been argued that, semantically at least, even Jesus Christ can be described as a Lucifer. I am the light of the world, John chapter 8 verse 12, as can be the Statue of Liberty, the planet Venus, or Lucifer can be used practically as a metaphor for any kind of light. Satanism is usually pretty easy to understand and seems pretty clear-cut in terms of atheistic and theistic forms. But when it comes to Luciferianism, it's a little more murky. What I mean by this is that anthropomorphically, the concept of Lucifer as a deity is based on ancient religion. So the worship of Lucifer as a god could be argued to be more in line with modern neo-paganism than actual Satanism. And in fact, you do find some groups of neo-pagans who actually worship Lucifer as one of their primary deities. Sometimes they're called dark pagans. This is more in line with modern neo-paganism than actual Satanism, except where the aspects of Lucifer as dictated by the Christian tendency to interpret any and all other deities as forms of the Christian devil or Satan or demons. And be honest, they do that, don't they? I mean, they even frequently accuse literal atheists of being Satanists, even though that accusation makes no sense at all to anyone with more than 2 brain cells. Atheistic Luciferianism at first glance resembles atheistic Satanism on the surface, but on closer inspection tends to differ somewhat. For example, where atheistic Satanism is more focused on materialism, hedonism, self-gratification, self-empowerment, atheistic Luciferianism is more focused on self-improvement, illumination, spirituality, and sometimes even philanthropy. So whether the character of Lucifer is understood or worshipped as a literal deity or not, in broader Luciferianism, there's usually also a whole range of subtext around how the participant understands Lucifer, whether it's in line with the original pagan understanding or understood as another aspect of the Christian character of Satan. Another important difference between Satanism and Luciferianism, I would say, is that religious Satanism seems to be more mainstream, vocal, and likely more prevalent than Luciferianism. Okay, so now we've covered the broad strokes of theistic and atheistic Satanism and Luciferianism, but there's still another form of Satanism we need to discuss. Only it isn't really actual Satanism at all, even if people on the inside and outside of it commonly tend to identify it as Satanism. It sounds complicated. Can anyone guess what that is? Let me explain. It's called a variety of different names, such as mythical Satanism, legend tripping, symbolic Satanism, and even pseudo-Satanism. I'm sure you've all heard the stories peddled by hysterical media or social media critics or ignorant politicians and even religious clerics, usually Christians, claiming that Satanism is all about violent criminal forms of behavior. Claims of Satanism being atheistic are misleading, that Satanists all worship the Christian devil, that they're all part of some underground secret society and conspiracy theory, woo-woo crap. But what they don't tell you is that this group isn't legitimate Satanism at all. This identity group has been called reverse Christianity. And the reason for that isn't simply because it frames patterns of belief and behavior in direct relation to exactly how Christians would imagine Satanists to behave and believe in their version of Satan, but also because it was actually invented by Christians themselves. That's right. This sort of Satanism, described by Christian zealots that describe vast, improbable conspiracy theories involving generational Satanist breeders and human sacrifice and the like, is a smokescreen created by Christianity itself. Now, you might at this point be thinking that I've lost my mind or that I'm making all this up, but let's take a look at how this happened. One of the best examples of this sort of disinformation is the so-called Satanic Calendar, or the Witch's Calendar, also called the Occult Calendar, which was created by a Christian propagandist called David Balseger back in the 1980s and distributed to law enforcement, churches, and it spread like wildfire. It played a prominent role in the satanic panic hysteria of the 1980s all around the world, and essentially purported to be a useful tool to law enforcement agencies, used to link suspected occult-related crimes to Satanism by looking on the calendar to see which supposed satanic unholy day, funny name, isn't it, was nearest to the date on which the crime was committed. But since there was an entry on virtually every day of the year, that was pretty much a foregone conclusion. So we can conclude that the aim of this thing was just to make Satanism look like it's related to criminal activity. Now, this calendar has already been thoroughly debunked, and every single entry on it has been exposed as being either nonsensical, irrelevant to the topic of the occult, or a Christian holy day misrepresented as satanic. The device as a whole existed solely as a means of portraying occult religions as inherently criminal in nature, when that is simply false. Unfortunately, even today, some law enforcement advisors or spokespersons still sometimes mention or refer to this fraudulent device, but they tend to be acting under their personal religious influences rather than in keeping within their actual professional mandates. Many Christian churches and other organizations still display this fake calendar on their websites, and some law enforcement agencies actively promoted and referred to it even as recently as 2015. Christian clergy have for many years warned against Satanists and Satanism in the conspiratorial sense, and that's really where it comes from. Keep this in mind. Often describing them as having the assistance of the Christian devil and its demons and the like, casting spells and having supernatural powers, yada yada yada, infiltrating schools and churches with nefarious aims, and so on. They're supposed to have a vast secret underground network with all sorts of bizarre practices and arrangements within government, churches, law enforcement, and even funeral homes to help them get rid of the evidence, I suppose. Originally, the purpose of spreading this sort of hysterical rubbish around was to unify their followers and keep them fearful of an imagined threat that didn't exist. However, over time, numerous unhappy Christians and people exposed to this false information, probably ones that were a little gullible, took it seriously and at face value, resulting in small groups and lone wolves, we know that term, don't we, with whom this sort of pseudo-Satanist reverse Christianity resonated, and they adopted it as their personal belief system. The consequence of this Christianity-created pseudo-Satanism is that the hysteria propagated by them, as far back as the 1960s, if not even earlier, gave birth to a self-fulfilling prophecy. This means that Christians get to have their confirmation bias stroked when delusional people get arrested for torturing animals while listening to Slipknot and shouting "Hail Satan," because the find confirms what they've been taught to believe in and convinces them that it really exists. Not stopping to realize that the people who got conned into thinking that torturing animals and painting their rooms black are tropes spread by Christian propagandists who claim that's what Satanists do. Christian beliefs about Satanism do not in any way reflect an accurate, informed picture of Satanism as a modern new religious movement, or NRM. And generally speaking, Christian clergy pushing the disinformative narratives about Satanism have no experience in Satanism as a religion at all to qualify them to pose as reliable, credible sources. They operate solely on the influence they have as Christian leader figures within Christian circles themselves. The truth is that those who identify with and practice what they believe to be Satanism as described in accordance with the Christian perception simply aren't Satanists. They're actually Christians, just operating from the opposite direction to other Christians. They're swimming upstream, if you will. Hence the term reverse Christian. They tend to act in a way that resonates with the way the Christian propaganda dictates Satanists ought to behave. And that's where the notion comes from that Satanists kidnap and sacrifice cats and babies, torture animals, or leave candles scattered about in graveyards after killing 13 chickens or rabbits, or listen to Slipknot again. Or all dress in black, or infiltrate churches, or schools, or any number of ridiculous fantasies. Another strong hint of inauthenticity is the claim that Satanists read from Christian Bibles in demonic rituals, when this sort of nonsense would fit perfectly within inverted Christianity, but would have no place whatever in religious Satanism or Luciferianism. Now hang on, some of you might be thinking, if Theistic Satanism and Luciferianism and Christianity created pseudo-Satanists all worship the Christian devil as understood from Christian religion, how come I'm saying one group is fake and the other isn't? That's a very good question. Let me answer it for you. The difference between these two tropes is that Theistic Satanists and Luciferians don't take their cues of what to believe or practice about Satan or Lucifer or Set or whatever aspect of the adversary they worship from Christianity or from Christians promoting what they believe Satanism is supposed to be, while so-called reverse Christians do. The former tend to use myths and material sourced from pre-existent religions outside of Christianity, while the latter depends on Christian influence to formulate its identity, beliefs, and practices. You might be wondering what the use is of fake Satanism. And the bare bones truth of that matter is that it's a propaganda tool that serves a whole bunch of purposes. For example, it helps Christians keep their flocks united, fearful and receptive to whatever messages their leaders feed them. It also serves as a convenient excuse to argue against any advancement in civil or human rights made in the West in the past 60-odd years. Lastly, the fact that some people take it so seriously that they actually realize this fantasy helps to confirm the belief that Satanism, as they believe it to be, actually exists. Hence, a self-fulfilling prophecy. I hope that's clear enough, but I think maybe I'll need to do another video about this fake sort of Satanism in future, so look out for that. To sum up, there are 4 main types or categories of religious Satanism today: Theistic and Atheistic Satanism, and Theistic and Atheistic Luciferianism, and maybe a few dozen other subtypes underneath that. The 5th group, as we've covered, called Pseudo-Satanism or Reverse Christianity, isn't part of Satanism at all. So it doesn't actually fit under the umbrella of Satanism, does it? Since it's really part of Christianity, and because it deliberately practices what Christianity sets out as its polar opposite. They live up to the name of reverse Christians. In this video, we only discussed the 4 main types of Satanism proper, and I mentioned only 2 organizations or temples within 2 of them as examples, but there are more out there that I'll hopefully get to in future. Let's leave it there for now. I think I've given you enough food for thought and probably scared some of you off, but it would be really nice if you clicked the like and subscribe buttons. I could use the support, thank you. Masticate on that for a while, and if you have any questions, just drop them down below and I'll do my best to reply to you. Until next time, take care.